In a world where respect is earned through sweat, sacrifice, and scars, sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one nobody expects. What happens when assumptions crumble in an instant, revealing a truth so profound that it changes everything? This is the story of a single moment that taught an entire military base the difference between what we see and who someone really is. It's about a joke that wasn't funny, a revelation that shook foundations, and a woman whose quiet strength had been hiding in plain sight all along. Some lessons come gently through wisdom and experience. Others arrive like lightning, sudden and undeniable, leaving everyone forever changed. The morning sun cast long shadows across Fort Brennan as Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez made his way toward the main administrative building. His combat boots echoed against the concrete walkway, each step carrying the confidence of someone who had earned his stripes through years of dedicated service. The base was already alive with activity, soldiers moving with purpose between buildings, vehicles rumbling past on their morning routes, and the distant sound of drill sergeants conducting early training exercises. Marcus had been stationed at Fort Brennan for 3 years now, long enough to know every corner of the sprawling military installation. He took pride in being part of this well-oiled machine, where hierarchy was clear, respect was earned, and everyone knew their place. The military had given his life structure and meaning after a chaotic childhood in East Los Angeles, where gang violence and poverty had threatened to derail his future before it even began. As he approached the building, Marcus noticed a woman walking ahead of him. She appeared to be in her early 30s, with shoulder-length brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore civilian clothes, a modest navy blue blazer over dark slacks, and comfortable walking shoes. Her pace was unhurried but purposeful, and she carried herself with a quiet confidence that caught his attention. What struck Marcus most was how she seemed to blend seamlessly into the military environment despite clearly being a civilian. Most visitors to the base looked uncomfortable or overwhelmed by the constant activity and strict protocols. They stayed close to their escorts, asked nervous questions, and generally appeared out of place among the sea of uniforms. This woman, however, moved through the base as if she belonged there. Marcus quickened his pace slightly, his curiosity getting the better of him. He had always been the type to strike up conversations, a trait that had served him well in building relationships throughout his military career. His fellow soldiers often joked that Marcus could make friends with a fence post if given enough time, and his easygoing nature had helped him navigate the sometimes challenging dynamics of military life. The woman ahead of him was heading toward the same building, and as they both approached the entrance, Marcus saw his opportunity. The glass doors reflected the morning light, and he could see her reaching for the handle. In a gesture that was part courtesy and part conversation starter, Marcus stepped forward and held the door open for her. She turned to thank him, and Marcus got his first clear look at her face. Her eyes were a striking green, and there was something in her expression that spoke of intelligence and experience. She had the kind of presence that commanded attention without demanding it, a quality Marcus had noticed in some of his most respected commanding officers. The lobby of the administrative building was bustling with activity. Soldiers moved between offices, carrying files and clipboards, while civilian contractors and military personnel conducted business at various desks. The woman seemed to know exactly where she was going, heading toward the information desk without hesitation. Marcus found himself walking in the same direction, his own business at the building providing a convenient excuse to observe her further. He watched as she approached the young private manning the information desk, a kid who looked like he had graduated from basic training just yesterday. Private Johnson was notorious for being overly formal with civilians, treating every interaction as if it were a military inspection. The exchange between the woman and Private Johnson was brief and professional. She spoke quietly, mentioning something about a scheduled meeting, and the private checked his computer before providing directions. Marcus noticed that throughout the interaction, the woman maintained perfect posture and spoke with the kind of clarity and directness that was valued in military communications. As she walked away from the desk, Marcus made his decision. His natural curiosity and friendly nature overcame any hesitation, and he approached her with the easy smile that had helped him navigate countless social situations throughout his military career. The administrative building's main corridor stretched before them, lined with offices and conference rooms where the important business of running a major military installation took place. The walls were decorated with photographs of distinguished service members and historical moments from the base's long history. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in the sterile but efficient glow that characterized most military buildings. Marcus had legitimate business in the building that morning. He was scheduled to meet with the personnel office regarding his upcoming promotion review, a meeting that could determine the next phase of his military career. However, his curiosity about this mysterious civilian woman had temporarily overshadowed his professional obligations. As they walked down the corridor together, Marcus decided to break the ice. His approach was casual and friendly, the same tone he might use with a fellow soldier he was meeting for the first time. There was nothing inappropriate or disrespectful in his manner, just the natural social instinct of someone who believed in the power of human connection. The conversation that followed would later replay in Marcus's mind countless times, each detail etched into his memory with crystal clarity. At the time, however, it felt like just another casual interaction, the kind of small talk that happened dozens of times each day on military bases around the world. The woman was polite, but reserved in her responses, answering his questions without offering much additional information. She had the demeanor of someone accustomed to maintaining professional boundaries, yet there was nothing cold or unfriendly about her manner. Marcus found himself increasingly intrigued by the contradiction she represented, a civilian who seemed perfectly at home in a military environment. Their conversation continued as they walked, touching on general topics like the weather and the impressive nature of the base facilities. The woman demonstrated a surprising familiarity with military terminology and procedures, using terms and references that suggested more than casual exposure to military life. When Marcus mentioned his upcoming promotion review, she offered what seemed like genuinely knowledgeable encouragement about the process. The corridor they were walking down led toward the heart of the administrative complex, where the base's senior leadership maintained their offices. This area was typically restricted to personnel with appropriate clearance levels and appointments, but the woman continued walking without any apparent concern about access restrictions. Marcus's curiosity continued to grow as their conversation progressed. The woman's responses to his questions revealed a depth of knowledge about military operations that seemed unusual for a civilian. When he mentioned his previous deployment overseas, she asked specific and informed questions about the region and the type of mission he had been involved in. Her questions weren't casual or general. They demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of military strategy and international operations. As they approached a junction in the corridor where they would need to part ways, Marcus felt compelled to satisfy his curiosity about this intriguing woman. His question was intended as light-hearted banter, the kind of casual joking that was common among soldiers. In his mind, it was a harmless way to acknowledge the obvious fact that she was a civilian in a military environment. The question that changed everything came naturally, almost spontaneously. Marcus had no way of knowing that his next words would transform not only his own understanding, but also create a moment that would become legendary throughout the base. In his experience, civilians who worked on military bases were typically contractors, consultants, or family members visiting for various administrative purposes. None of these roles required military rank or formal command structure. The moment stretched between them, seemingly ordinary, yet pregnant with possibility. The fluorescent lights continued their steady hum. Other personnel moved through the corridor going about their daily business, and somewhere in the distance, the sounds of military life continued their familiar rhythm. Neither Marcus nor the woman could have predicted what was about to unfold. The administrative building around them represented years of military history and tradition. Its walls had witnessed countless conversations, decisions that affected the lives of thousands of service members, and moments both significant and mundane in the ongoing operation of one of the country's most important military installations. Soon, it would witness something that none of the personnel present would ever forget. Marcus's question hung in the air between them, a simple inquiry born of curiosity and casual conversation. The woman's response, when it came, would shatter every assumption he had made and transform his understanding of leadership, respect, and the true meaning of military service. In that moment, neither of them knew they were about to participate in a lesson that would echo through the halls of Fort Brennan for years to come. The stage was set for a revelation that would challenge everything Marcus thought he knew about authority, command, and the faces that leadership can wear. The woman beside him carried secrets that would soon reshape his entire worldview, and the casual conversation they had been sharing was about to become something far more significant than either of them had anticipated. What happened next would become the stuff of base legend, a story told and retold whenever discussions turned to respect, assumptions, and the sometimes surprising nature of military hierarchy. The lesson that was about to unfold would resonate far beyond the walls of the administrative building, touching the lives and perspectives of everyone who would eventually hear the tale. The moment of truth was approaching, though neither participant yet realized the magnitude of what was about to occur. In military settings, respect and recognition are earned through service and sacrifice, but sometimes the most important lessons come from the moments when our assumptions are challenged and our understanding is forced to evolve. The woman walking beside Marcus carried more authority and responsibility than he could have imagined, and her patient tolerance of his casual questions was about to give way to a revelation that would change everything. The administrative corridor that had witnessed countless routine interactions was about to host a moment of profound education and lasting impact. As they continued their walk through the building, the ordinary moment was building toward an extraordinary conclusion, one that would demonstrate the importance of looking beyond surface appearances and recognizing that true leadership can come in forms we might not expect. The lesson was about to begin, though the teacher and student were not yet aware of their roles in the drama about to unfold. The question came with a grin and a casual tone that Marcus had used countless times before when joking with fellow soldiers. Looking at the woman walking beside him, clearly a civilian in her professional attire, he chuckled and asked, "So what's your rank around here? Are you like a general or something?" He emphasized the word general with obvious humor, the kind of playful exaggeration that soldiers often used when teasing each other about promotions or responsibilities. Marcus expected a laugh, maybe a witty comeback about being a civilian general, or some other lighthearted response. What he didn't expect was the subtle change that crossed the woman's face. Her expression didn't become angry or offended, but something shifted in her eyes. There was a moment of consideration, as if she were weighing her response carefully. The woman stopped walking and turned to face him directly. Her posture straightened slightly, and Marcus noticed for the first time that her bearing had a distinctly military quality to it. When she spoke, her voice carried a different tone than it had during their casual conversation. It wasn't harsh or confrontational, but there was an unmistakable authority in her words. "Actually," she said, meeting his eyes directly, "I am a general." For a split second, Marcus thought she was playing along with his joke. His brain struggled to process the information, certain that she must be continuing the light-hearted banter they had been sharing. But as the seconds ticked by, her expression remained serious and steady. There was no smile, no indication that she was kidding or exaggerating. Marcus felt his stomach drop as the reality of her words began to sink in. His mind raced through everything he knew about military protocol and the proper way to address senior officers. He had been walking casually beside a general officer, engaging in informal conversation, and had just made what could be construed as a mocking joke about her rank. The color drained from his face as he realized the magnitude of his error. In the military hierarchy, the gap between a staff sergeant and a general was enormous. Generals were the senior-most officers in the entire military structure, responsible for major strategic decisions and the command of thousands of troops. They were individuals who had dedicated decades of their lives to military service, rising through the ranks through exceptional leadership and dedication. Marcus's military training kicked in, and he immediately began to straighten his posture, preparing to render the proper respect that such a senior officer deserved. But before he could complete the formal salute that protocol demanded, the general raised her hand slightly, a subtle gesture that indicated he should wait. "Before we continue," she said quietly, "there's something you should understand about making assumptions based on appearances." The corridor around them continued its normal flow of activity, but Marcus felt as if time had slowed down. Other personnel moved past them, going about their daily business, completely unaware of the profound lesson that was unfolding. The fluorescent lights seemed brighter somehow, and Marcus became acutely aware of every sound, from the distant hum of air conditioning to the muffled conversations from nearby offices. The general's words carried weight that went far beyond the immediate situation. Marcus realized that this wasn't just about his casual joke or his failure to recognize her rank. This was about something much deeper and more fundamental. Throughout his military career, he had been taught about respect, discipline, and the importance of proper protocol, but he had never been challenged to examine his own assumptions about what leadership looked like. Standing before him was a woman who commanded thousands of soldiers, made decisions that affected national security, and had earned her position through years of distinguished service. Yet because she wasn't wearing uniform, because she looked like any other civilian contractor or administrative personnel, Marcus had completely failed to recognize the authority and experience she represented. The realization was humbling in a way that Marcus had never experienced before. He had always considered himself to be a good soldier, someone who understood and respected the military hierarchy. He took pride in his ability to work well with people of all ranks and backgrounds. Yet in this moment, he was forced to confront the fact that his understanding had been incomplete. The general watched his face as understanding dawned, and Marcus could see that this wasn't the first time she had encountered such assumptions. There was a patience in her expression that spoke of experience with similar situations, yet also a firmness that made it clear this was an important teachable moment. "I don't wear my uniform every day," she explained, her voice remaining calm and professional. "Sometimes my responsibilities require civilian attire for meetings with government officials, defense contractors, or international delegations. But my rank and my authority don't change based on what I'm wearing." Marcus nodded, though he struggled to find words adequate to the situation. Everything he thought he understood about military bearing and recognition had been turned upside down. He had always believed he could identify senior officers by their demeanor, their way of carrying themselves, their obvious command presence. This general possessed all of those qualities, but his preconceptions about what a general should look like had blinded him to the obvious signs. The administrative building around them represented the nerve center of military operations for the entire region. Decisions made in these offices affected training schedules, deployment rotations, resource allocation, and strategic planning that reached far beyond the boundaries of Fort Brennan. The woman standing before Marcus was integral to all of these operations, yet he had walked beside her, treating her like any casual acquaintance. As the weight of the situation continued to settle over him, Marcus began to understand that this encounter was about more than just military protocol or proper respect for rank. This was about the broader implications of making judgments based on limited information or surface appearances. In his military training, he had been taught to gather intelligence, assess situations carefully, and avoid making tactical decisions based on incomplete information. Yet in his personal interactions, he had failed to apply these same principles. The general seemed to recognize the internal struggle that Marcus was experiencing. Her expression softened slightly, though her authority remained unmistakable. "This isn't about punishment or embarrassment," she said. "This is about learning and growth. Every soldier, regardless of rank, has moments when they discover something new about themselves or their understanding of the military." Marcus appreciated her words, but he knew that the lesson he was learning would stay with him for the rest of his career. This wasn't the kind of mistake that could be easily forgotten or dismissed. The casual confidence with which he had approached their conversation, the assumptions he had made, and the joke he had thought was harmless all reflected aspects of his character that he would need to examine and improve. The corridor that had seemed so familiar just minutes before now felt different somehow. Marcus looked around at the other personnel moving through the building and wondered how many other assumptions he made on a daily basis. How many times had he categorized people based on their appearance, their role, or his limited understanding of their background? How many opportunities for learning and connection had he missed because of his preconceptions? The general's presence commanded a different kind of respect than Marcus was accustomed to giving. It wasn't the formal, protocol-driven respect that he showed to his direct superiors in the chain of command. This was something deeper, a recognition of the years of service, sacrifice, and dedication that had brought her to her current position. She had earned her rank through merit and performance, rising through a military structure that demanded excellence at every level. Marcus thought about his own military journey, from his recruitment in Los Angeles through basic training, advanced education, and his current position as a staff sergeant. Each promotion had required demonstrated competence, leadership ability, and commitment to military values. The woman standing before him had traveled that same path, but had gone far beyond where he currently stood, achieving a level of responsibility and authority that few ever reached. The realization made his casual joke feel not just inappropriate, but almost insulting. He had treated lightly something that represented decades of professional dedication and personal sacrifice. The rank of general wasn't just a title or a position. It was a recognition of exceptional service to country and military profession. As these thoughts raced through his mind, Marcus became aware that their conversation was attracting subtle attention from other personnel in the building. The extended pause in their movement, the serious nature of their discussion, and the general's obvious authority were beginning to register with those around them. He noticed a few curious glances and realized that this encounter was becoming more public than either of them might have intended. The general seemed aware of the attention as well, but she showed no sign of being concerned or uncomfortable. Her composure remained steady, and Marcus realized that this kind of public leadership moment was probably routine for someone in her position. She was accustomed to being observed, to having her actions and words carry weight beyond the immediate conversation. "The lesson here," she continued, her voice carrying just enough volume to be heard clearly but not enough to seem like she was making a public address, "is that leadership and authority come in many forms. The military is a diverse institution, and our strength comes from that diversity. When we make assumptions about people based on limited information, we diminish our own effectiveness and miss opportunities to learn and grow." Marcus nodded again, understanding that he was receiving more than just a correction or reprimand. This was genuine mentorship from someone who had reached the pinnacle of military achievement. The general was taking time from what was undoubtedly a busy schedule to ensure that he learned something valuable from his mistake. The administrative building continued its normal rhythm around them, but for Marcus, this moment had become a defining experience. He knew that he would remember every detail of this conversation for the rest of his military career and beyond. The lesson about assumptions, respect, and recognition would influence how he approached not just military relationships, but all of his interactions with people. The general glanced at her watch, a subtle reminder that she had responsibilities and appointments waiting for her. But she didn't rush or try to end the conversation abruptly. Instead, she seemed committed to ensuring that the teachable moment was complete and that Marcus truly understood the broader implications of what had occurred. "I want you to think about this experience," she said, "not as a failure or embarrassment, but as an opportunity. Every soldier has moments when they learn something important about themselves or their profession. What matters is how you use that knowledge going forward." Marcus felt a surge of gratitude for her patience and wisdom. Many officers in her position might have simply accepted a formal apology and moved on, or worse, might have made the correction in a way that was humiliating or punitive. Instead, she had chosen to turn the moment into a genuine learning experience, one that would benefit not just him, but potentially many others if he shared the lesson appropriately. As their conversation continued, Marcus began to understand that he was witnessing leadership at its finest. The general's handling of his mistake demonstrated the kind of character and wisdom that had undoubtedly contributed to her rise to the military ranks. She was firm but fair, authoritative but approachable, and committed to the development of the soldiers under her ultimate command. The moment was building towards something that Marcus couldn't yet anticipate, but he could sense that their encounter was far from over. The lesson he was learning was important, but he had a feeling that there was more to come, something that would make this experience even more memorable and impactful than it already was. The general looked at Marcus with an expression that combined understanding with quiet authority. "Walk with me," she said, gesturing toward the main corridor that led deeper into the administrative complex. "I think you should see something." Marcus fell on his step beside her, his mind still reeling from the revelation of her true identity. As they walked, he noticed subtle changes in the environment around them. The casual chatter that had filled the corridor moments before seemed to diminish, and the personnel they encountered began to take notice of the woman he was accompanying. Their first encounter came within 20 steps of their resumed walk. A young lieutenant emerged from one of the side offices, carrying a stack of reports and moving with the hurried pace of someone trying to meet a deadline. As his eyes fell on the general, his entire demeanor changed instantly. The lieutenant immediately stopped, straightened to attention, and executed a crisp salute. "Good morning, General Patterson," he said, his voice carrying both respect and a hint of nervousness at the unexpected encounter. General Patterson returned the salute with practiced precision, her response professional but warm. "Good morning, Lieutenant Williams. How is the quarterly training assessment progressing?" "Ahead of schedule, ma'am. We should have the preliminary reports ready for your review by Thursday, as requested." "Excellent. Keep up the good work." Marcus watched this exchange with growing amazement. The lieutenant's reaction had been immediate and unquestionable. There was no doubt, no hesitation, no questioning of authority. The young officer had recognized General Patterson instantly and had responded with the kind of respect and protocol that Marcus now realized he should have shown from their first moment of meeting. As they continued walking, Marcus began to notice other details that he had missed during their earlier conversation. The way other personnel in the corridor unconsciously stepped aside as General Patterson approached, creating a subtle path of respect. The way conversations quieted momentarily as she passed, not from fear or discomfort, but from the natural deference shown to senior leadership. Their next encounter came at the junction where the main corridor intersected with the hallway leading to the senior officer's quarters. A master sergeant was discussing something with two junior enlisted soldiers when he caught sight of General Patterson. The conversation stopped mid-sentence as all three soldiers immediately came to attention. "General Patterson," the master sergeant said, his salute sharp and precise. The two younger soldiers followed suit, their movements displaying the kind of crisp military bearing that came from extensive training and deep respect for the chain of command. General Patterson acknowledged their salutes and paused briefly to speak with the master sergeant. Marcus learned that she was discussing the implementation of a new training protocol that would affect multiple units across the base. Her questions were specific and informed, demonstrating a detailed knowledge of operational procedures that could only come from years of hands-on military experience. As they spoke, Marcus began to understand the scope of responsibility that General Patterson carried. She wasn't just a figurehead or an administrative officer pushing papers from behind a desk. She was actively involved in the daily operations of the base, making decisions that affected the training, welfare, and effectiveness of thousands of soldiers. The conversation revealed that she had recently returned from a deployment overseas, where she had been responsible for coordinating multinational military operations in a complex international environment. The Master Sergeant mentioned specific logistical challenges they were facing, and General Patterson provided solutions that demonstrated both strategic thinking and practical experience. When their discussion concluded, Marcus and General Patterson continued their walk. The corridor ahead of them led toward the base's main conference facilities, where senior leadership meetings and important briefings took place. As they walked, Marcus noticed that word of General Patterson's presence was somehow spreading ahead of them, though he couldn't determine exactly how the information was being communicated. The next group they encountered was larger and more diverse. A mix of officers and senior enlisted personnel had gathered near the entrance to the main conference room, apparently waiting for a scheduled meeting to begin. As General Patterson approached, the entire group came to attention in unison, their salutes creating a synchronized display of military precision that Marcus found both impressive and humbling. At ease, General Patterson said, her voice carrying easily across the group. The soldiers relaxed but maintained their respectful posture, clearly waiting to see if she would address them further. Marcus watched as General Patterson took a moment to speak with several individuals in the group. She knew many of them by name, asking about their families, their recent assignments, and their professional development. Her interactions revealed a leader who was genuinely invested in the people under her command, someone who saw beyond rank and position to recognize the individual contributions of every soldier. One young sergeant mentioned that his wife had recently given birth, and General Patterson congratulated him warmly before asking about the adjustment to military family life. Another soldier was preparing for advanced training, and she offered encouragement while also providing specific advice about making the most of the educational opportunity. These personal interactions illuminated another aspect of leadership that Marcus was beginning to appreciate. General Patterson's authority wasn't based solely on her rank or position. It was earned through genuine care for her soldiers and demonstrated competence in her responsibilities. The respect she received was freely given because it had been earned through consistent leadership and personal investment in the military community. As they moved past the group, Marcus reflected on his own leadership style and the relationships he had built with the soldiers under his supervision. He realized that he had sometimes focused more on the technical aspects of military leadership, ensuring that orders were followed and procedures were completed correctly without giving enough attention to the personal development and welfare of individual soldiers. Their journey through the administrative complex continued, and with each encounter, Marcus gained a deeper understanding of General Patterson's role and influence. A group of civilian contractors working on a construction project immediately stopped their work to acknowledge her presence. Military police officers patrolled the area, rendered proper courtesies as she passed. Administrative personnel emerged from their offices to greet her with obvious respect and genuine warmth. The cumulative effect of these interactions was overwhelming for Marcus. He began to realize that his casual joke about her rank hadn't just been inappropriate. It had revealed a fundamental misunderstanding of military hierarchy and the respect that senior officers commanded throughout the entire military community. General Patterson seemed aware of the impression these encounters were making on Marcus, but she didn't comment directly on his obvious amazement. Instead, she used each interaction as an opportunity to demonstrate different aspects of military leadership, from operational decision-making to personal mentorship to strategic communication. When they encountered a group of junior officers discussing a complex training exercise, General Patterson listened carefully to their challenges before offering guidance that revealed her extensive operational experience. When they met a maintenance crew working on equipment repairs, she demonstrated knowledge of technical systems that surprised Marcus with its depth and accuracy. As they approached the central hub of the administrative complex, Marcus noticed that their presence was creating a subtle ripple effect throughout the building. Personnel were becoming more alert, more focused, and more conscious of their military bearing. The presence of such senior leadership had a natural effect on the entire environment, raising the standard of professionalism and attention to detail. General Patterson guided their conversation toward the broader principles of military service as they walked. She spoke about the importance of continuous learning, the value of diverse perspectives, and the responsibility that every soldier had to support and develop their colleagues. Her words carried the weight of experience and the wisdom that came from years of successful leadership in challenging environments. Marcus found himself thinking about his own military journey and the assumptions he had made about advancement and leadership. He had always believed that he understood what it meant to be a successful soldier, but this encounter was revealing gaps in his understanding that he hadn't even known existed. The administrative building around them represented more than just offices and meeting rooms. It was the nerve center of a complex military organization that touched the lives of thousands of people. General Patterson was one of the key figures responsible for ensuring that this organization functioned effectively, that soldiers received proper training and support, and that military objectives were achieved with maximum efficiency and minimum risk. As they continued their walk, Marcus began to understand that he was receiving a rare opportunity to observe senior military leadership in action. Most staff sergeants would never have the chance to spend extended time with a general officer, to observe their decision-making process, and to witness firsthand the respect and authority that such leaders commanded. The lesson that had begun with his inappropriate joke was evolving into something much more comprehensive and valuable. General Patterson was showing him not just the proper respect due to senior officers, but the broader principles of military leadership and the complex responsibilities that came with high-level command positions. Each encounter they had during their walk added another layer to Marcus's understanding. He saw how General Patterson balanced authority with approachability, how she maintained military discipline while showing genuine care for individual soldiers, and how she commanded respect through competence and character rather than simply through rank and position. The building's main corridor stretched ahead of them, leading toward areas of the complex that Marcus rarely visited in his normal duties. As they walked, he realized that their journey was taking them toward the most senior levels of the military hierarchy, where the most important decisions affecting the entire base were made. General Patterson's pace was steady and purposeful, and Marcus sensed that their destination was significant. The encounters they had experienced so far were just the beginning of what promised to be an even more revealing and educational experience. The lesson about assumptions and respect was continuing to unfold in ways that Marcus could never have anticipated when he had made his casual joke just minutes earlier. The administrative complex around them was beginning to feel different, more significant, and more meaningful than it ever had before. Marcus was gaining an appreciation for the layers of responsibility and authority that made the military function effectively. And he was beginning to understand his own place within that larger structure in ways that would influence his entire future career. As they approached the heart of the administrative complex, General Patterson's pace began to slow slightly. Marcus could sense that they were nearing something significant, though he wasn't sure what to expect. The corridor ahead led to the most secure and important areas of the building, where the base's senior leadership conducted their most critical operations. There's something else you should understand about leadership and respect, General Patterson said as they walked. It's not just about individual interactions or personal recognition. Military leadership affects entire communities of people, and the decisions made at senior levels have consequences that reach far beyond what most soldiers ever see. Marcus nodded, though he wasn't entirely sure where her comments were leading. Their walk had already taught him more about military hierarchy and leadership than years of formal training had provided, but he sensed that General Patterson had something specific in mind for concluding their impromptu lesson. As they turned a corner, Marcus saw ahead of them a large open area that served as a central gathering point for the administrative complex. This space was used for formal ceremonies, important announcements, and occasions when large groups of military personnel needed to assemble. At the moment, it appeared that some kind of event was either beginning or ending, as Marcus could see clusters of soldiers in dress uniforms moving through the area. General Patterson paused at the entrance to this open space, and Marcus could see that she was scanning the crowd with the practiced eye of a senior leader assessing a situation. Her expression was thoughtful, and Marcus got the impression that she was making a decision about something important. "Marcus," she said, using his first name for the first time since their conversation began, "I want you to observe what happens next, and I want you to think carefully about what it means." Before Marcus could ask what she was referring to, General Patterson began walking into the open area. At first, their movement attracted little attention from the various groups of soldiers scattered throughout the space. Conversations continued, and the normal flow of activity proceeded without interruption. Then, something remarkable began to happen. One by one, soldiers throughout the area began to notice General Patterson's presence. The recognition spread like a wave across the gathered personnel, and Marcus watched in amazement as the entire dynamic of the space began to change. The first soldier to notice was a young corporal who happened to look in their direction as they entered the area. His reaction was immediate and unmistakable. He came to attention and rendered a sharp salute, his action catching the attention of the soldiers around him. As they turned to see what had prompted his response, they too recognized General Patterson and immediately came to attention. The effect spread rapidly throughout the area. Conversations stopped mid-sentence as soldiers realized that a general officer was present. The casual atmosphere that had prevailed moments before transformed into one of formal military respect and protocol. Within seconds, nearly 100 soldiers were standing at attention, their salutes creating a sea of synchronized military precision. Marcus found himself at the center of this remarkable display, walking beside General Patterson as she acknowledged the respect being shown by the assembled soldiers. The silence was profound, broken only by the sound of their footsteps and the subtle movements of soldiers maintaining their positions of attention. General Patterson returned the collective salute with the same precision and authority that Marcus had observed in her individual encounters throughout their walk. Her voice carried clearly across the open space as she addressed the assembled soldiers. "At ease," she said, her command immediately allowing the soldiers to relax their formal postures while maintaining their respectful attention. What followed was a brief but powerful demonstration of military leadership in action. General Patterson took a few minutes to address the assembled group, speaking about recent accomplishments on the base, upcoming challenges, and the importance of continued dedication to military excellence. Her words were inspiring without being overly dramatic, practical without being mundane, and personal without being inappropriately familiar. Marcus listened to her address and realized that he was witnessing the kind of leadership that created lasting loyalty and motivation among soldiers. General Patterson's words carried weight because of her rank and position, but they carried meaning because of her obvious competence and genuine care for the people under her command. As her brief address concluded, General Patterson began moving through the crowd, and Marcus followed at a respectful distance. The soldiers they encountered maintained their military bearing, but relaxed enough to engage in brief conversations when she stopped to speak with individuals or small groups. Marcus observed dozens of interactions as General Patterson moved through the assembled personnel. She knew many of the soldiers by name, remembered details about their families and career goals, and offered specific encouragement or guidance based on their individual circumstances. Her presence elevated the entire gathering, creating an atmosphere of professionalism and pride that was palpable. The cumulative effect of witnessing this mass display of respect and recognition was overwhelming for Marcus. He began to understand that his earlier joke hadn't just been inappropriate toward General Patterson personally. It had been disrespectful toward the entire military institution and the thousands of soldiers who looked to leaders like her for guidance and inspiration. As they moved through the crowd, Marcus noticed that many of the soldiers were glancing at him with curiosity. His presence beside General Patterson was unusual, and he could see questions in their expressions. Some might have wondered if he was a staff officer or special assistant, while others might have been curious about the nature of his relationship to such senior leadership. The attention made Marcus acutely aware of his own behavior and bearing. He found himself standing straighter, moving with more purpose, and paying closer attention to every detail of his military appearance and demeanor. The proximity to such high-level leadership created a natural desire to meet the standards that General Patterson represented. Their journey through the assembled soldiers took nearly 15 minutes, as General Patterson took time to speak with representatives from various units and departments throughout the base. Marcus learned that she was preparing for a major inspection that would evaluate the entire installation's readiness and effectiveness. Her conversations revealed the complexity of coordinating such an evaluation and the level of detail that senior leadership maintained about every aspect of base operations. When they finally reached the far side of the assembly area, General Patterson paused and turned to Marcus. The crowd of soldiers behind them had begun to disperse, returning to their normal duties, but the impact of the experience lingered in the air like the echo of an important ceremony. "Now do you understand?" she asked, her voice carrying both the authority of her position and the patience of an effective teacher. Marcus struggled to find words adequate to express what he had learned. The display of respect and recognition he had just witnessed went far beyond anything he had previously experienced in his military career. He had seen individual soldiers show proper courtesy to superior officers countless times, but he had never witnessed an entire community of military personnel responding to a single leader with such immediate and unified respect. "I think I'm beginning to understand," he said, his voice reflecting the humility that the experience had instilled in him. "I realize now that my joke wasn't just inappropriate, it was ignorant. I completely failed to recognize not just your rank, but everything that your position represents to all of these soldiers." General Patterson nodded approvingly. Leadership in the military isn't just about giving orders or making decisions, although those are important responsibilities. It's about serving as a symbol of the values and standards that we all swear to uphold. When soldiers see their senior leaders, they're not just seeing individuals. They're seeing the embodiment of the institution they've chosen to serve. Marcus reflected on her words as he looked back toward the area where the soldiers had assembled. He could see small groups still engaged in conversation, and he noticed that their bearing and demeanor remained more formal and purposeful than it had been before General Patterson's presence had elevated the tone of their interactions. Every interaction a senior leader has with soldiers affects not just that immediate moment, but the way those soldiers think about their service and their commitment to military excellence, General Patterson continued. That's why respect for rank and position is so important. It's not about ego or personal recognition. It's about maintaining the structure and standards that make the military effective. The lesson was profound and multifaceted, touching on aspects of military service that Marcus had never fully considered. He began to understand that his casual attitude toward General Patterson's authority reflected gaps in his understanding of military culture that went far beyond simple protocol or etiquette. As they concluded their extended conversation, General Patterson offered some final thoughts that would stay with Marcus for the rest of his career. She spoke about the importance of continuous learning, the value of challenging one's own assumptions, and the responsibility that every soldier had to contribute to the positive culture of their military community. "This experience today isn't something to be embarrassed about," she said. "It's something to learn from and build upon. Every soldier, regardless of their current rank or position, has opportunities to demonstrate leadership and contribute to the success of their unit and their mission. Marcus thanked her for her patience and wisdom, expressing genuine gratitude for the time she had taken to turn his mistake into a valuable learning experience. He realized that many officers in her position might have handled the situation very differently, and he felt fortunate to have encountered a leader who valued teaching and development over punishment or embarrassment. As they prepared to part ways, General Patterson offered one final piece of advice. Remember that leadership is earned through service and demonstrated competence, but it's maintained through character and consistent commitment to the welfare of others. Keep working to develop yourself, both as a soldier and as a person, and look for opportunities to help others do the same. Their conversation concluded where it had begun, in the administrative corridor of Fort Brennan, but Marcus felt like a completely different person than the one who had casually joked about military rank just an hour earlier. The experience had transformed his understanding of military leadership, respect, and the complex responsibilities that came with senior positions in the armed forces. As General Patterson disappeared into one of the high-security areas of the complex, Marcus remained in the corridor for several minutes, processing everything he had learned. He knew that this experience would influence every aspect of his future military service, from his interactions with superior officers to his own development as a leader. The administrative building around him looked the same as it had that morning, but Marcus's perception of it had been fundamentally changed. He now understood it as the nerve center of a complex organization led by dedicated professionals who had earned their positions through years of service and sacrifice. The casual joke that had seemed harmless just hours before now seemed almost incomprehensible to him. As he finally made his way toward his original appointment with the personnel office, Marcus carried with him a new appreciation for military hierarchy, leadership, and the importance of treating every interaction with the respect and seriousness it deserved. The lesson he had learned would become a story he would share throughout his career, always emphasizing the importance of looking beyond surface appearances and recognizing the true nature of leadership and service. 3 months had passed since Marcus's life-changing encounter with General Patterson, and the impact of that single conversation continued to reverberate through every aspect of his military service. The lesson he had learned that day had fundamentally altered not just his understanding of military hierarchy, but his entire approach to leadership, respect, and personal development. The story of his experience had spread throughout Fort Brennan in the way that powerful lessons often do in military communities. Marcus had initially been reluctant to share the details of his encounter, feeling embarrassed by his initial mistake and uncertain about how his fellow soldiers would react to the story. However, as time passed and he reflected more deeply on General Patterson's teachings, he began to understand that sharing the lesson was part of his responsibility to the military community. The first person Marcus had told was his immediate supervisor, Sergeant First Class Jennifer Walsh, during their weekly professional development meeting. He had expected criticism or disappointment, but instead found that Walsh was deeply impressed by General Patterson's handling of the situation and by Marcus's willingness to learn from the experience. Rodriguez, Walsh had said after hearing the complete account, most soldiers go their entire careers without having a personal mentorship experience with a general officer. The fact that you were able to turn an embarrassing mistake into a profound learning opportunity says something important about your character and your potential as a leader. Walsh had encouraged Marcus to share his experience more broadly, suggesting that the lesson about assumptions and respect could benefit many other soldiers on the base. She helped him understand that his story wasn't really about his mistake, but about the transformative power of effective leadership and the importance of remaining open to learning and growth. The opportunity to share his story on a larger scale came when Marcus was asked to speak at the base's monthly professional development series, a program designed to provide educational and motivational presentations to soldiers at all levels. Standing before an audience of nearly 200 military personnel, Marcus felt nervous but determined to convey the full impact of his experience. As he recounted the events of that morning in the administrative building, Marcus could see recognition and understanding in the faces of his audience. Many soldiers nodded knowingly when he described making assumptions based on civilian clothing, and he could sense that his experience resonated with common challenges that military personnel faced when trying to navigate the complex social dynamics of their profession. When he reached the climax of his story, describing the moment when hundreds of soldiers came to attention as General Patterson entered the assembly area, the audience was completely silent. Marcus could feel the power of that moment, even in the retelling, and he could see that his fellow soldiers were beginning to understand the broader implications of the lesson he had learned. The questions and discussion that followed his presentation revealed that his experience had touched on issues that many soldiers struggled with. Young enlisted personnel spoke about the challenges of showing proper respect to officers they didn't immediately recognize. Senior non-commissioned officers discussed the importance of mentoring junior soldiers about military courtesy and protocol. Officers shared their own experiences with being underestimated or misjudged based on their appearance or circumstances. One particularly meaningful comment came from a young female lieutenant who explained how Marcus's story had helped her understand some of the challenges she faced as a relatively young officer, trying to establish authority and respect among more experienced enlisted personnel. She thanked him for sharing an example of how assumptions about appearance and background could affect military relationships in ways that weren't always obvious. The discussion revealed that Marcus's experience was part of a broader pattern of learning and growth that characterized successful military careers. Every soldier present had stories of moments when they had been forced to examine their assumptions, challenge their understanding, or adapt their behavior based on new information or experiences. In the weeks following his presentation, Marcus found that his story had become a reference point for discussions about leadership and respect throughout the base. Training sessions on military courtesy began, including references to his experience as an example of the importance of looking beyond surface appearances. New soldier orientation programs incorporated elements of his lesson to help incoming personnel understand the complexity and diversity of military leadership. General Patterson herself had become something of a legend on the base, though Marcus learned that she preferred to keep the focus on the lessons rather than on her personal role in the story. Through the base grapevine, he discovered that she had a reputation throughout her career for turning challenging situations into teaching opportunities, and that his experience was just one example of her commitment to developing the soldiers under her command. Marcus's own career trajectory had been significantly influenced by the personal growth that resulted from his encounter with General Patterson. His increased awareness of leadership principles and military culture had made him more effective in his current role and had positioned him for advancement opportunities that might not otherwise have been available. When his annual performance evaluation was conducted, his supervisor noted marked improvements in his leadership style, his interaction with personnel of all ranks, and his commitment to professional development. The lessons he had learned from General Patterson had influenced his approach to every aspect of his military service, from routine administrative tasks to complex training exercises. Marcus began to take on additional responsibilities as a mentor for junior soldiers, helping new arrivals to the base understand not just the formal requirements of military service, but the cultural nuances and interpersonal dynamics that could make the difference between success and struggle in their military careers. His experience with General Patterson had taught him the value of patient teaching and the importance of turning mistakes into learning opportunities. One particularly rewarding mentoring relationship developed with a young private who reminded Marcus of himself during his early military service. Private Davis had joined the Army from a challenging background similar to Marcus's own, and he initially struggled with the formal protocols and hierarchical structure of military life. Marcus shared his story about General Patterson as a way of illustrating the importance of respect and recognition, and he watched as Private Davis began to develop a deeper appreciation for military culture and leadership. The impact of Marcus's story extended beyond Fort Brennan when it was featured in the base newsletter and subsequently picked up by military publications and websites. The lesson about assumptions and respect resonated with military personnel around the world, and Marcus began receiving emails and messages from soldiers sharing their own experiences with similar challenges and revelations. One message that particularly moved Marcus came from a young female officer stationed overseas who explained how his story had helped her deal with situations where her authority was questioned or undermined because of her gender or apparent youth. She thanked him for sharing an example of how patient leadership and teachable moments could transform understanding and create lasting positive change. The broader military community's response to his story helped Marcus understand that his experience represented something larger than just a personal learning moment. It had become part of an ongoing conversation about leadership, diversity, and the importance of creating inclusive military environments where all personnel could succeed regardless of their background or appearance. General Patterson's influence on Marcus's career continued even though their direct interaction had been limited to that single morning. Her approach to leadership and mentorship had become a model that Marcus tried to emulate in his own interactions with both subordinates and superiors. He found himself asking questions similar to those she had posed. How can this situation become a learning opportunity? What assumptions might I be making? How can I help others grow and develop through this experience? The administrative building where their encounter had taken place became a symbol for Marcus of the transformative power of effective leadership. Every time he walked through those corridors, he remembered the lesson about looking beyond surface appearances and recognizing the true nature of authority and respect. The building that had once seemed routine and unremarkable now represented the complexity and richness of military culture. As Marcus continued to advance in his military career, he carried forward the lessons he had learned from General Patterson about the importance of continuous learning and personal development. He made a commitment to remain open to new experiences and challenges, to question his own assumptions, and to look for opportunities to mentor and develop others in the way that General Patterson had invested in him. The story of his encounter with General Patterson became part of his personal narrative as a soldier and leader, a defining moment that illustrated the potential for growth and transformation that existed within military service. He realized that every soldier had similar moments available to them, opportunities to learn profound lessons about themselves and their profession if they remained humble enough to recognize and embrace those opportunities. Years later, as Marcus prepared for his own advancement to senior leadership positions, he reflected on the lasting impact of that single conversation with General Patterson. The lesson about assumptions, respect, and recognition had shaped not just his understanding of military hierarchy, but his entire approach to human relationships and personal development. He understood now that General Patterson's patient teaching had been an investment in the future of military leadership, a way of ensuring that the values and principles of effective military service would continue to be passed down through generations of soldiers. Marcus felt a responsibility to continue that tradition of mentorship and development, to look for opportunities to transform mistakes into learning experiences, and to help other soldiers discover their own potential for growth and leadership. The morning that had begun with a casual joke had evolved into a lifetime commitment to excellence, respect, and service. Marcus's encounter with General Patterson had become more than just a personal learning experience. It had become a legacy that would continue to influence military personnel and leadership development for years to come. The lesson about looking beyond surface appearances to recognize true leadership and authority had proven to be timeless and universally applicable, a principle that would continue to shape military culture and effectiveness long after the specific details of that day had become part of base legend. Through his continued service and leadership, Marcus ensured that General Patterson's investment in his development would multiply and expand, touching the lives of countless other soldiers who would benefit from the wisdom and understanding that had been passed down through their brief but transformative encounter. The story of a staff sergeant who learned to see beyond assumptions had become a testament to the enduring power of effective military leadership and the importance of remaining open to learning and growth throughout one's career.